Uh, okay, so let me start the presentation here. And just a reminder, please, for everybody, this is being recorded. I want to be able to document the questions and concerns from you all and how I answer, and so we can come back that and to make a public record that can be shared later. But aloha kako. This is a presentation on Oceaneera's proposal for an offshore aquaculture project off Ever Beach. I'm going to start with an introduction about Oceaneera, about the company, just so that you know a little bit about who we are. We're a small aquaculture company that's based here in Kona, and we really believe that that there is value in offshore aquaculture as a conservation tool, and that is our work is focused very much on that. And we like to think that we work on the nexus where there's this crossover between economic opportunity and ecological imperative, where there's a chance to use the private sector to achieve the conservation goals that we want to see. And when we think about the global challenges that we face, we've broken these down to these 6 here that we think are really critical, that humanity needs to be able to deal with these, and that those of us that are working in the ocean space, in aquaculture or fisheries management or just ocean conservation, that these are areas where we should bear these in mind. And Oceaneera is focused on 2 general areas where we think they can be a way of moving towards solutions for these challenges. And one is macroalgae, Limu, just to be able to grow more Limu so that either for food or for feed or for fertilizers or for fuel, and also potentially as a means of carbon sequestration. And then also there's an important component that we need to be transitioning humanity towards more marine-based foods, so that there's less reliance on terrestrial livestock. And that's where a lot of the focus for our fish farming work comes. So the macroalgae work, as I'd said, there are these 5 areas where there is potential for producing products and profits from any of these local food or feed for either fish or for livestock. There's interest in feeding seaweed to cattle or to pork to reduce the methane production. There's potential for using seaweeds as fertilizers so that there's not so much nitrogen fertilizer, which is very carbon intensive. And some of our work that we're doing here in Kona at the moment is funded by the US Department of Energy. They've got a long-term vision about looking at Limu as a potential carbon source for fuels. And we're also talking to people that are looking at the potential for seaweeds as a means for carbon sequestration. We've got a small aquaculture R&D project here at the Natural Energy Lab in Kona, where you can see it over here on the right-hand side. It doesn't always have a rainbow, but we took the photo when there was one. And the bar graphs down the left-hand side here are for some of the native species of Limu that we're working with. The size of the bar graph shows the growth rate that we've been able to develop in terms of percentage growth per day. And you can see that the gracilaria or the algo gets up almost to 30% per day, which is phenomenal. It has some challenges in that we're not sure exactly how we're going to be able to grow this offshore. We need to be able to get the Limu to stick to a string. And so that's where the Limu color or the sargassum that you see in the upper bar here, very slow growth rate, but we are able to reproduce that in the hatchery and to be able to get the keikis onto a string, which is then ideal for being able to move out offshore. And also for the ulva or the sea lettuce, we've been able to produce those, have those sporulate so that the sporophytes can then be attached to a string. There's still some real challenges with this, and it's still very much at the research scale. We have the permits in place to move forward with an offshore demonstration, a very small scale array for demonstration offshore of Kona between Kaiwi Point and Kailua Bay. This is in partnership with Mackay Ocean Engineering and the Department of Energy. And this is to attempt to be able to see if we can use deep seawater through a wave-powered pump to provide the nutrients that you need. The challenge with growing limu in tropical waters is that there's usually a limitation for nutrients, the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And so we're looking at the practicality of a deep seawater pump here at this Kona array. And we'll hopefully be able to refine the offshore limu culture techniques here through this work. But then we've also been involved with developing fish culture systems, primarily focused on offshore production, because we believe that that is the way that you can grow the fish that humanity needs with the least environmental impact. And the focus on sustainable seafood is, as I've mentioned earlier, there's this need for humanity to transition to more marine sourced foods. And that's just not Neil talking. That's coming from a UN high-level panel report on global climate change and the oceans, and recognizing that the oceans can actually be, rather than just a victim of global climate change, if we do this right, the oceans can be part of the solution. And whilst we really admire our colleagues in aquaculture that are doing freshwater fish production, the real challenge that we have here, if we're going to replace terrestrial livestock like beef or pork, you need to be able to have fish that have that real, what we call the palate appeal, that just the momona, the rich flavor that people really crave. Otherwise, when they go to a steakhouse or the plate lunch, they're going to ask for the beef or the pork. We want to have fish that is really appealing to consumers. And this, although fisheries are becoming increasingly well managed around the world, it can't come from just wild fish stocks. You can't have this transition. It can't just be from fishing harder. We need to figure out how to grow the seafood that's going to feed humanity in the future. And we need to figure out how to do this fairly quickly. The FAO estimates that there's another 40 million tons of seafood that is going to be needed in the next 20 to 30 years. And that's about 50% increase on the current production. And so Ocean Era is looking at a number of areas here. We're developing different diets for carnivorous marine fish, such as the kampachi, that are more scalable and sustainable. And then if we're going to figure out more better ways to be feeding carnivorous fish, we also think it's really important that we be developing technology to grow herbivorous fish, fish that will actually eat limu. And then we've also been involved over a number of years with pioneering both the technology and the permitting requirements for offshore aquaculture in US waters, and we also have been doing some of that abroad. So now, just to speak to each of these in turn, the sustainable scalable feedstuffs for carnivorous marine fish. I think just recently I'd highlight our results, which came from about this time last year, about 12 months ago. We concluded this trial, which was a diet for kampachi, which had 0 fish meal and 0 fish oil in the diet, that we're able to use feed grade poultry meal that would have normally gone into cat food or dog food, and to use Veramaris fish oil, which is a microalgae that's grown in South Dakota in an old ethanol plant. They figured out how to get this microalgae to grow in an ethanol plant, and it's very high in EPA and DHA. And so we've been able to blend that into the diet to be able to eliminate the fish oil in there. And the growth performance of these fish was comparable to the fish meal and fish oil control, as you can see here in the right-hand side graph. So the work with herbivorous fish, we've been very much focused on Nenue or kyphosids, the rudder fish, for a number of reasons here. You know, they're going to be able to either eat limu. We haven't figured out exactly which species of limu are going to be most nutritious for them, but it could be something like a tilapia food or a cat food. And they taste like a snapper. Well, not exactly like a snapper, you know, when you're eating Nenue, but we have had some Nenue just this morning. We had a professor from aquaculture, Professor Dan Bonetti from University of Miami was here at our site, and we had some ceviche from some Nenue that we'd been growing. And Professor Bonetti thought that it was Campachi ceviche. It's that good. I think those of you that have eaten the poke from Nenue know that when it's good, it's really good. And we've done some trials here. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner here, the tilapia diet. This is a standard tilapia diet. And then there's a diet that was 80% from freshwater plants that worked just as well, actually a little bit better than the tilapia diet. We want to be able to figure out what the correct limu is, that the marine algae is that's going to be the correct diet for the herbivorous fish, for the Nenue. We haven't figured that out yet, but there's still some research to go with that. I want to give a bit more background on our history in offshore aquaculture here. I was one of the original founders with Dr. Dale Sava of Kona Blue Water Farms here, which was the first integrated hatchery and offshore farm in the US. It was offshore of Keohuli Point here in Kona using the submersible sea station cages here. And we got up to production of 500 tons a year in 2008. We weren't yet profitable because 500 tons a year isn't really a large enough operation. That's like having a dairy farm that's only got 15 cows. You need to get 50 or 70 cows before you can have a dairy farm that makes commercial sense. And so it was in 2009, it was taken over by Blue Ocean Mariculture, and they've recently been acquired by another company that's involved in offshore aquaculture throughout the Americas, Cuna del Mar, and they have plans for expansion now to over 2,000 tons a year. And just 2 weeks ago, they announced that they had received Aquaculture Stewardship Council certification for the Blue Ocean Mariculture site. And that's the first marine finfish certification for ASC in the United States. And ASC, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's like Marine Stewardship Council for wild fish. So it's a very rigorous measure of the environmental and social responsibility of the farm. And I think they can be very proud of that, that awarding that certification. Ocean Era, or as before we were known as Campachi Farms, our previous name, have also been involved in some pioneering work in federal waters. The Villela Beta test was an unanchored drifter pen that we had out here in the back of the Big Island, supported by the National Science Foundation. It was a great PR tool in terms of advertising the potential for offshore aquaculture. It was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 25 best inventions of the year in 2012, which wasn't really fair. It was not our idea. Other people had had this concept for a drifter cage. We just were the first ones to go out and actually test it out. And it worked phenomenally well on a number of levels. The performance of the fish was great. It was also important, as I said, as a public relations tool to publicize the potential for offshore aquaculture. But what was really important is it was a superb fish aggregating device, or a fishing buoy for the local fishermen here in Kona. And so we went and did a second iteration of that with a moored pen that is still out there, operated by another company. And it is a great fad, or great fishing buoy here off Kona. We've also been involved in development of an offshore farm in the Sea of Cortez in Mexico that we established in 2017. You can see it down here in the bottom left-hand corner. There are 6 of these submersible pens in operation now. It's 4 miles off the coast inside the Bay of La Paz in the Sea of Cortez. And that was also certified by Aquaculture Stewardship Council. That was the first farm to be certified for Campachi in the world, and that was in 2019. So I think the ASC certification speaks to the potential for offshore aquaculture to really meet these rigorous standards. We're also involved in what we call the Villela Epsilon project. This is another one of our demonstration projects here that we're planning to do this in the Gulf of Mexico, because we'd like to help the Florida and the Gulf of Mexico fishing and boating communities understand the potential benefits from offshore aquaculture. We're also wanting to pioneer the permitting in US federal waters on the mainland. But we realized to be able to do that, you have to get the social license or the permission from the communities. And that's why we think a small demonstration pen is going to allow the Florida fishing and boating community to recognize that this can actually be a great asset, and that they needn't be fearful of offshore aquaculture, that this is something that can work in cooperation with offshore recreational and commercial fishing. So I'm going to now switch. That's the background on Ocean Era to help you understand who we are. What we see as the Ever Beach proposal is the next step in this pioneering of offshore aquaculture. And this came from our thinking of bringing all of these threads together for herbivorous fish and new net pen systems. It's great to be doing this in Mexico and Florida, but we're living here in Hawaii, and why would we not want to be doing these things here as well? If we're going to have this global perspective on the problem, there's the old mantra of thinking globally and acting locally. And we really feel that it's incumbent upon us individually. We feel that we really need to be doing this here in Hawaii. And so when we think about doing Nenue and Limu, part of the challenge that we had before with the Kampachi operation down here in Kona is that we didn't get very good traction in the major market here in Hawaii, because it cost us about as much money to fly fish from Kona to Honolulu as it costs to fly fish from Kona to LA or to San Francisco. And the mainland market was the potential growth in the mainland market was so much greater. And so we felt we didn't really get the traction in the Hawaii market that Randy Cates did. And I think Randy's actually on the call here. And hats off to Randy, that he had seen the local market need here, and he had focused his Moi operation very specifically on that. I think when we are thinking about Nenue, that's a fish that's going to have much better traction here in the local market. And we want to have that closer to the local market. We also want to be able to be where there's more infrastructure support on Oahu, and there's a bigger labor pool, so that our chances of being able to hire locally are a lot better there in Oahu. So Randy's operation was under the Hukilau Farms operation when they, in 2009, they went and did a second EA to get permission to expand to up to 1,000 tons per year. And that's just out off Ever Beach, just to the west of the mouth of Pearl Harbor. But that operation ceased in 2013, and they handed the lease back to the state, and that site has lain fallow ever since. So what we are proposing now is that we'd like to reactivate that operation and get a permit to be growing Nenue and Moi and Limu. Nenue, for the reasons that we've spoken of, that there's an important ecological reason and a local market demand for this. We've talked to Oceanic Institute, and they're happy to start. We'll be working with them to collect local broodstock from Oahu, and they have a marine fish hatchery there that can be providing the fingerlings for us. And we think that there is strong local demand for this fish. And as we said, we think part of, as I'd said earlier, part of the key for this is that you can put them onto a herbivorous fish diet, very low on the food chain, which resolves one of the main issues for marine fish culture, where people have always been concerned about, well, you're just feeding fish to grow fish. The trials that we've done to date have shown that you can get to a size of about a pound in less than a year. They're very robust, they're resistant to the ectoparasites that are sometimes a challenge for marine fish. And what we're hoping to be able to do here is to be able to be also growing the Limu to feed to the Nenue. One of the biggest costs for, the biggest cost for an offshore aquaculture operation is the feed. Generally, it's around 60 to 70% of the cost of producing the fish is the feed. And so if we can just be supplementing 10 or 20% of the diet, or perhaps even more than that, with the right species of limu that we could be growing on the same site, that would reduce our costs tremendously, and it would also allow us to have more of an integrated co-culture operation. We want to be able to grow moi on the site as well, because there's still very strong demand, both in the restaurants in Oahu, but also one thing, as I said, that I really admired the way that Randy had done this, and they got their fish out into retail outlets in Oahu, and it was very popular there. And we think there still is, as we speak to distributors and we speak to consumers in Oahu, and there's a lot of demand. People are really looking forward to this fish coming back onto the market. And then we'd also like to have integrated into this permit the limu as either feed for the Nenue or to provide human food into the Honolulu market. And this might be something like the limu color, or the sea grapes, the callirpa or ogo, or it might be other species that are more suitable as a feed for the Nenue, or it might be other species that we could grow for the traditional market, such as we're doing some work with Limu lipoa here in Kona as well. This is another opportunity. Pairing the limu with the fish pens is another opportunity to resolve this challenge of where do you get the nutrients to grow the limu. Instead of here in Kona, we're testing the deep sea water, we think there that it's a very good likelihood that we'll be able to co-culture, get good growth from the limu, because it will be down current of the fish pens. And so that's where it'll get the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So this is the kind of net pen array that we would like to be deploying at this site. It's on a swivel point mooring. And this is a system that's been used in Israel, in the Mediterranean, for over 15 years here. And it has a number of advantages that we'd like to bring to bear here. The plan is that we would have the fish pens here, these cylindrical and rectangular pens would be where we would grow the fish. And then this vessel over here on the right-hand side in this image, there on the down current side is where we would grow the limu. Our application is initially for 5 pens that would allow 50,000 cubic meters. That's about the same volume that Randy had permitted originally for his 2009 permit. But we'd also like our permit to allow us, if we're meeting the environmental standards that EPA and the state water division, clean water branch, and the monitoring for the substrate, if we're able to meet those environmental standards, we'd like to be able to expand up to 10 net pens. I want everybody to understand the idea of this swivel point mooring. So I've simplified the design here a little bit to show this here on the left-hand side is where the swivel would be. And then you'd have multiple bridle lines to the net pens where the fish would be cultured. And then down current of the net pens where these green lines are is where we would have the limu. And this works so that the limu is always down current of the fish pens, because that makes the most nutrients available for the limu. And it's also best for the fish health, that you don't have the limu being up current of the fish at any one stage. And now to help you understand how this will swivel around this single point, this would be if the current was coming from the right-hand side, that it would stream out to the left-hand side of the image here. But then as the current would shift, it would move around and swivel here from one side to the other. So it would cover a larger arc, or what we'd call an umbra, a shadow here, as it would move around in this circle. And so it wouldn't be fixed over one location. This here is a Google Earth image of the Ever Beach site. And this here is what we would call our preferred site. This is the site that Hukilau Foods, Randy's operation, had been operating originally here. It's around 125 feet deep. It's 1.3 miles offshore. We'd probably be working out of Kalailoa Harbour, and it's about 10 miles from there. It is close to Honolulu Airport Reef Runway, and that does give the Department of Transport airports some concern, where we need to be addressing those challenges with them. But I think that the main reason why this is preferred for us is this is where the original site was, and our sense was that the community was comfortable with that from the comments that Huki Lau had received on their 2009 EA. There was general sentiments of support from the community and from the fishing community. And so we thought that rather than change the location, that this would be best. However, in the presentation that we gave to the Ever Beach Neighbourhood Board just this time last week, there were some concerns expressed about its proximity to Ever Beach itself. And so what we'd like to put on the table for consideration is that perhaps there are some alternative sites. We could move just out deeper, which would be about another 0.6 of a mile further offshore. This is around 90 meters deep, this alternative one that you can see here, just to the below the original farm site there. It's a deeper water, but it's a little bit more outside of the view plane from Ever Beach. Once you get to about 1.5 miles offshore, that the net pens would not be visible from shore. And then there's also that some of the neighbourhood board comments were, could you please move this further to the west so that it's just not right in front of Ever Beach. And so we're very pleased to put this out here as a second alternative. And we're really keen to take comments from the community and from other stakeholders as to which of these alternatives would be preferable. So this site here is on a broader shelf as you move further west here. This is where the oil tanker offloading buoys are, and so you can't go much further west there without giving the Department of Transport harbours some heartburn. And you'd also be getting closer, as we came further west, you'd be getting closer to Kolailoa airfield, which is just here in the upper left-hand side of the airport. But I want to just reiterate that we feel no strong commitment to any one of these alternatives. And if the community has one that they would strongly prefer, we are happy to work with that preference. So just to recap quickly, the main points, I think the team that we have here has proven that we can go and pioneer offshore operations. The site has been proven previously from its operations to have minimal environmental and socio-cultural impact, that we're focusing the species here on low trophic and local market opportunities. The potential for co-culture is something that we think is a really strong point of this proposal. The net pen system has proven to be reliable in the Mediterranean, and it's also operationally efficient because they are submersible pens, but they can then also raise up to the surface and we can work them on the surface. The swivel point array is proven to be beneficial for fish health. That's a swivel point array that we have been using here in Kona as the experimental Velella project since 2014. It's also, we believe that there will be benefits for algal growth there, and that it's also inferred, or we can imagine that there's minimal benthic impact because it will move over the substrate or the benthos as it sweeps in that arc. And so there are broad benefits here as providing a source of local food and economic diversification and jobs. So this is just one more step in our outreach efforts to date. What we're asking for here is we would like to be able to maximize our outreach to the community and to other stakeholders. And so if you can look at this list here now, and if you can see any people that we have not identified, people or groups that we have not identified that you think that we should be speaking to, please let us know. Take my email address here or put it into the chat column and let us know who else we should be speaking to, please. We will take it as a failing on our part if we don't have a comprehensive outreach to the community, and if we get further down the track with this and people are standing up in meetings and saying, I haven't heard about this. We want to be able to please have maximum outreach. So thank you all very much. I'll leave this up here for a minute so that you can all take down my email address if you wish, and my phone number. Please text me if you want to communicate through that as well. But I'll switch off the screen sharing here in a minute so that we can perhaps won't be all just focus on Neil, and we'll be able to hear from you, your thoughts on this. Just in terms of initial management of our conversation, if you can raise your hand or switch your video on and wave at me if you want to speak. When you are speaking, we've got about 50 participants on the call at the moment. And so we have about an hour left in our allotted time. I'm happy to run this longer if people want to, but just for time efficiency, if people could limit their comments to 2 minutes, around 2 minutes maximum, please. I'm not going to be keeping close watch on this. I'm going to be listening to your questions rather than keep, but at some stage we might have to ask you to wrap up if it's going on, just so that everybody gets a chance to speak. And if you use your 2 minutes and then there's clanging silence and nobody else wants to speak, then okay, you can come back and rant for longer. This is meant to be maximized. I want to limit the time so that we're able to maximize the chance for everybody to have their say, please. So I've entered the share screen and we've come back onto the video view here, and I'm happy to take public comments here. Again, just to reiterate, everybody, we are recording this meeting, and we will make this recording available online, and we'll also make a PDF of this PowerPoint presentation will also be available through our website, or I'm happy to communicate it, pass it directly to anybody that would like that. So I'm going to open up the meeting here, please. Now, let us know if you would like to speak. Forrest, please go ahead. This is Forrest McFall.
Okay, thank you, Neil. A very good presentation. I've been into freshwater aquaponics for going on about, I guess, 10 years. Found it kind of fun and enjoyable, and I'm fascinated with the idea that the ocean water aquaponics might be increasing here. I have a scuba diving background, and so I guess most of my questions would relate to questions about safety of the project as far as predators, shipping, things like that might it might cause problems. That's about it. So I wanted to see if I could get some answers on that, and otherwise I'm very fascinated. So thanks again.
Thank you, Forrest. Yes, to your questions about safety for shipping and predators, the predator challenge for offshore aquaculture has I wouldn't say been completely resolved, but has been largely resolved through the development over the last 10 to 15 years of new mesh technology. That there is a polyethylene terephthalate material called Kikonet that is a monofilament, but it is a really, really strong plastic. And then there's also a range of different copper alloy materials, and we would be using one or the other of those on the net pens. The beauty of using the copper alloy is that also minimizes biofouling, that you won't get algal growth or invertebrate growth on the copper alloy. And it's just like a chain link. Both of these materials are just like a chain link fence. For shipping, actually the way that we will need to get Coast Guard permits for this, but Coast Guard considers this an aid to navigation because it will be lit. Anything that is on the surface will have lighting on it and be marked on the navigational charts. And I don't believe that there was any, when the Kate's Hookielau operation was in place, I don't think that there were any issues with shipping at that location. But thank you for your comments and interest, Forrest. Appreciate that. Any other comments? You can't all be that shy.
Can I jump in, Neil?
Sure, Michael. Is it Michael?
Oh, yeah, this is Michael. For the record, Michael Kane from Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. General curiosity on what your timeline is. Like, when do you foresee preparing environmental documents or a permit application? Or is it too early to predict when that would be?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Good to see you here. Our thinking is that we'd largely be guided by the response from the community, I think, at this stage. Generally, the response has been positive, and I think given that it was previously the subject of 2 prior environmental assessments, we're not expecting that there's going to be any substantive objections. There might be concerns from the community, such as the relocation issue, which of the sites is preferred. And so if there are no strong objections to the concept, we'd like to start working on a draft environmental assessment. What we did previously with the Kona Kampachi operation here in Kona, and that I think we would like to do again, is sort of go through the process of doing a draft that we did a draft environmental assessment and we put that up on our website and asked for comments or concerns before we officially submitted that to your office and to the NOAA, the Army Corps office and the EPA office. And I think that's our thinking of the way we'd like to approach this again, is to develop a draft environmental assessment, then put it on our website, and everybody that is on our mailing list, and I hope everybody that's on the call here communicates with us so that you can be on our mailing list and you can be getting updates. We'll notify you when that is available, and we'd like to get the comments on the draft before we actually get the comments on, before we go and formally submit it to you, so that you don't get any surprises and we don't get any surprises.
All right, thanks, Neil.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here, Michael, after hours. That's a measure of your commitment.
Hey, Neil, how you doing? This is Alexander Gauss, if I may just ask.
Please,
make
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll flip on my camera so you have a recorded record of that as well. So I really want to recognize again, I appreciate the approach that you guys have taken with this, being super open. Sort of sends a really positive message, and I'm going to recognize that, as well as your company's just general, ecosystem, ecologically friendly approach. And I also appreciate seeing some of the alternatives sites you had proposed there, based on some of the comments at the EVA neighborhood board meeting that I was at last week as well. So some of this might be repetitive, and I'm not going to take up too much time, hopefully, but I have a couple of questions on how this works. So this swivel, we've spoken with some of the local fishermen. So I'm an Eva Beach resident, also, as you know, on the Eva neighborhood board. And some of the fishermen were totally fine with the previous setup, right? Because they could fish around it. You could do all these things. And so I'm trying to understand the footprint of this system. It's a larger diameter than the previous fixed pen. This is a swivel system. I'm not clear on how fast it swivels. And it also has the potential to get larger, to extend from 5 to 10 pens. And so what's the footprint? What's the diameter of this area that we're looking at? And what does that mean for fishing? If it is swiveling, is there going to be a large diameter where local fishermen are prohibited from fishing? Or is it only the buoys over the cage and they move at such a slow rate that people are going to be able to fish around them? These are the types of things that I think for local fishermen that are going to be limited potentially, that we want to know, what is the impact?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. And I think we would encourage local fishermen to be fishing around the net pens. I think we like the idea of this being something that they recognize as being an asset rather than being a loss of access. We are not going to restrict access around the pens in any way for fishing. There might be issues for people that want to scuba dive around the pens, because that's then a liability issue, but that's something that we can work out with the state and with what our insurance would be, what the insurance obligations would be. But in terms of people fishing a pelu or bottom fishing kind of crab, that's something that we would encourage. We'd like them to see this as an asset rather than a loss. The arc that it will swing on is going to depend largely on the depth. As we go out into deeper water, you've got to have more scope on your anchor. If we start with, say, at 40 meters deep, which is around about where the existing site is, that if you've got say a 4-to-1 scope there on the anchor, that's going to be 160 meters of swing. And then if you've got 5 pens that are 30 meters diameter and perhaps 10 meters in between each pen, you've got another 200 meters of pens there. So that's going to be sort of 300, 350 meters that it will swing, the length of the arc. But at no stage are we going to say to, we're not going to put perimeter buoys out and tell fishermen, you can't come inside this array. If we've got divers in the water and they're trolling right in over the top of the pens, we're going to be, hang on guys, we've got a dive flag up, please, we've got divers in the water, keep away. But at any other time for them to be fishing in around these pens, we're going to view that as part of the benefit that we bring.
Okay, so I mean, I just want to, it might be a little bit nitpicking, but it's not that there will be no limit. It's just going to limit over, my understanding is correct, it's going to be directly over. So if I'm trawling a line at 30 meters, 20 meters, I can't go directly over this pen, and I can't go anywhere over that swivel component. Is that correct? If it's swinging around, I can't go over it with my boat trolling the line.
Depending on the depth, how deep you are trolling, there would be issues coming over the top of that liner, depending on how close you're coming to the pens.
So I think that area of this presentation deserves a little bit more attention, right? Because this is the biggest impact that I foresee it having on recreational users. It's fairly close to an existing shooting range that already limits a lot of fishing activity. And so if we're talking about 360 meters of an area where people can't fish, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against this operation. I'm just trying to learn and understand how it's going to impact people, right? Because as I said before, the previous Moi farms, fishermen actually like it because it's an anchored area where people can fish around and net around and everything. This is a whole different operation. This is something that swivels, and I'm trying to understand. I don't understand fully how it can serve as a fad because it's moving, and how people are trying to trawl, and there's this big swing. Those are the areas that, even with what you're saying right now, it's still not clear to me what's going to be. And I think for people that I'm a part of that community, and that's the concern. And there is a lot of positive. Like I said, a lot of fishermen were very fond of the Moi farm. It was very productive, and they fished around it. But I'm not getting a clear picture from this presentation of how it's going to impact the fishers. And I think that is something that needs much more detail and be explained better if you want an honest response from the community.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I think perhaps the best way to address that is, we need to finalize the design here so there can be some understanding about exactly what we're talking in terms of how steep or how flat that mooring line is. And we can also then get some better sense of the current movement there. Most of the current is going to be parallel with the shore. And so the array is going to run parallel with the shore. And that's the direction that the fishermen are usually trolling. And so, they would, if they're trolling in early dawn or late dusk, they'd be able to see the lights for where the array is, and then be able to go as close to the array as they could safely. But yeah, without having dominating the conversation here too much with these engineering questions. I'm happy to go through that conversation as we get better understanding of the precise design, that if there are fishermen that you could introduce us to that we could be speaking to and sharing that with and understanding their concerns better. I suppose we could consider an alternative to go back to just the traditional grid mooring system, but that then makes the Limu culture then becomes a lot more challenging as to where you put that and how much nutrient that gets. And perhaps what we ought to also do is have some of your Ever Beach fishermen talk to some of the Kona fishermen here, because the Velella project that we have that's continued now out off Keoho, that is the same sort of single point mooring. It's in 6,000 feet deep. So it's actually got 12,000 feet of mooring line. It's operated by a different company now, but we had operated that between 2013, 2014, and local fishermen love that because it's a great fad, and they don't have any problem at all with it. There's the feed barge and the single pen there, and they troll in around that, and I think it's very, very popular with the local fishing community. But thank you very much for your comments, Alex. Perhaps as we go forward, if you could follow up with me to give some introductions to some of the fishermen we might work with.
I can definitely do that, and I guess I'm just going to use this. These are going to be my last comments. Is that just to think about? You know, I know that most of your sites are further offshore. I like the alternative one a little bit further if you're going to have night lights, especially from people that have in the community voiced about eyesores and things of this nature. You know, that could take you out of the visibility spectrum. It could be a benefit for you to avoid some potential kickback. It gives you a lot of the same access, avoids a lot of the problems. So maybe pushing it out a little bit further, that's something that I think the people in my neighborhood would favor. So just to have it on record for that. Yeah.
Greatly appreciate those comments, Alex. Thank you. Very grateful. Sandy Ward has her hand up.
Actually, we are in the company of people with generations of ancestral wisdom. And I'd like to just pause all the rest of us and make sure that those who are in this company have a chance to make their comments. So I do have questions, but I'm calling for those folks here to be able to voice their opinion. So I know Uncle Walter's here, Mikiela Lidstone, and those who have that wisdom. So I'd like to not have a bunch of the rest of us taking up all that time. So I'm gonna invite my friends, especially from Huimalama Lokoia. I saw many of you here, and I want to give you folks a chance to comment. So you before me.
Thank you, Sandy. I do appreciate that.
God. We have plenty of time.
Perhaps in the interest of time, Sandy, if you want to put your comments forward, and we'll provide other opportunity for Walter and Mikiela. It's not like Walter to be quiet, for Walter and Mikiela to provide their comments at some later stage.
Mahalo. If anyone sees a hand go up from Uncle or those, like I said, that I want to go before me, please, someone just do this.
Thank you, Sandy.
Because I work in the Pu'uloa area, my concern is that what's on an EIS And even though there's good people involved, there's inadequate monitoring of pollution. And there has been for decades. And so we're seeing that, the effects of that now. So not just meeting the requirements that are on paper, but in what ways will you be monitoring, for instance, all the extra fish waste that will come from such a concentrated population? Disease monitoring. I think my biggest concern would be that, you know, I have plenty of friends in the salmon nations, and I've seen what's happened there with disease spreading. So more than just meeting the requirements, what types of monitoring for those two things would you do? The extra nitrates in the area from the fish waste, disease, and how would the community know that that monitoring is being done? How transparent will you be?
Very good questions, Sandy. Thank you very much. This is something that we as marine biologists are cognizant of, the potential for things to go wrong if they're not done well. And so through all of the planning and thinking this through as to location and systems and species, we're thinking about how we can do this in a way that has minimal impact. And I think that's born or validated in the Aquaculture Stewardship Council certification of the Kona Kampachi operation here and the site in La Paz as well. That ASC certification involves rigorous monitoring of water quality, benthic impacts, that the potential for disease interaction between the wild stocks and the farm stocks. And that certification for both of those companies, that's available online. If you go onto the Aquaculture Stewardship Council website, you can see the full audit on those farms. So that is actually in interest of full transparency. I've been involved with the ASC for the last 15 years from when it was first being developed, because I think it's really important that we have an external source of validation for environmental and social responsibility for aquaculture. And so we would also, for this farm, rather than just meeting the regulatory requirements, which, yes, we absolutely will want to meet those, and that information will be publicly available. When we started the Kona Kampachi operation, we began the process there of putting the water quality and benthic monitoring reports that came from our Clean Water Branch NPDES permit. We made those available on our website. And I do believe that Blue Ocean Mariculture has continued with that tradition as well, that they have continued to make that information publicly available. We would make the same commitment, and we'll make that commitment be binding. If you would like, Michael Kane, please make a note of this. Let's make that commitment binding into our permit, that information would be publicly available. But more than just meeting the regulatory requirements, because the regulatory requirements that's sort of the minimum. And I think we would like to see ourselves held to a higher standard. And that is where I would also commit to you as a community, and also if there's a way to bake this into the permit standards for this, that we will also aspire to ASC certification for this farm. I say aspire to because it's a rigorous standard, and so there's no guarantee that we would be able to meet all those requirements initially, but there are processes then for us to go through what's called an aquaculture improvement program to set a stepwise trajectory for how we might be able to meet those standards. And so even if we didn't meet those standards from the very outset, that we will commit to continuing to persevere to try to achieve those. Does that answer your question, Sandy, or do you still have concerns?
Just that there's no, if you don't meet those standards, then there's no enforcement or fines, or it's a voluntary system, but that does answer my question.
Yeah, there are there are enforcement capabilities under the regulations, under the NPDES permit. But as I say, that's the minimum that I think anybody should be expected to meet. Michael had his hand up. Please, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, just, hi, Sandy, just to address that, my office is a regulatory agency and we do have enforcement capabilities. So anything that ends up, any condition of the permit or any permit that's approved by the Board of Land and Natural Resources, we have a lot of enforcement powers if they violate their final permit. So we can include, I mean, I was trying to pull up Kona Blue's permit as we spoke, but there are pretty strict conditions for operating in Hawaiian waters. So just wanted to throw that out. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Walter, welcome. Aloha.
On the Grassel area, we have a huge problem on Molokai with the gorilla ogo. We got like tons and tons of that stuff. Are you guys going to be doing feed trials to find out maybe we can use those things to feed the Nenue?
Great question, Walter. We're very keen with the Nenue on seeing ways that we can be collaborating with the Kia'i Lokoia, the fish pond operators. And I think we've actually, through CTSA, we're moving towards a program support for that program where we'll be able to collaborate with Oceanic Institute and with your fish pond operators in Molokai there to go and test this out. It's hard for us here at Nelha to bring in gorilla ogo because the state doesn't want to see that being, for good reason, doesn't want to see that being moved around. But if we are able to, in the last month, we had a really spectacular hatchery run with the Nenue, where we end up with about 50,000 keikis, and we've been able to give those away to fish pond operators here in Kona. They're hoping that it will be able to keep the limu down in their fish ponds. And I hope that we'll also be able to get some of the keikis from future hatchery runs across to you there in Molokai. And I think that's the best location for it. Rather than bringing the gorilla ogo over to Kona and testing it here, if we can get some Nenue across to your ponds there in Molokai, and then you run those trials there. And I think the CTSA project will have support for us to be able to test that out.
So, but you're gonna need to feed your fish some kind of a gracilaria, right? You said that's the best one so far for production.
That's the one that grows fastest, and that's why the gorilla ogo is a problem, is it grows so fast. But actually, when we did an initial trial with it wasn't ogo. We thought that it was ogo. We thought that it was gracilaria, but we got the genetic testing on it, and it's a different kind. It's not actually gracilaria, it's soliaria. And we fed that to Nenue. This was last year, and over about a 6-week period, the Nenue didn't grow on that as well. We also ran some trials with Limu kala, which we know they eat Limu kala. When you look at the guts of a Nenue, it's like half of what you see in the guts is from the wild. It's Limu kala. But when we fed them just with that one diet, there wasn't good growth on those fish either. So we think that there's some, either it's a combination of the Limu or it's some other species that's out there that they're eating that allows them to thrive. And we don't know yet, but there's a lot of incentive for us to be able to figure this out, because it's from both an ecological and economic perspective, it'd be great to be able to be feeding more limu to these fish.
You're growing them in the pens. Are you going to be trying to figure out how to do pellets?
Sorry, ask again, Walter. That was.
If you're growing the fish in the pen, are you going to be trying to figure out how to make pellets? I mean, you're not going to just feed them the raw gracilaria, right? Are you going to figure out how to make the food into pellets to feed them?
Yeah, I think initially what we're going to be testing here in Kona over the next couple of months with these keiki that we just got from this larval run is testing them on a catfish diet and a tilapia diet, which is almost completely vegetarian diet. And then also supplementing that, we're doing a collaborative project with Hilo where we're testing, getting their students to come in and they're testing the pellet diets and then the pellet diets and seaweed and the limu and then just the limu diet as well. So seeing what combination works best. And I think as for a human diet, you know, if you just ate taro and nothing but, or you just ate pork all the time, you're not going to be very healthy. It's a balanced diet. And I think the same thing is going to hold true for the Nenue as well, that it's going to work best if we can get a combination of feeds. But it's still, we're still developing that. But thank you very much for your question, Walter. Did you have other comments, Walter?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Mahalo. Michael Adriana? You're muted, Michael. You're still muted. Let me try and unmute you.
So sorry about that. This might be a completely irrelevant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, having had experience with fish cage culture in Israel. What is the situation in terms of storm potential and mitigation? Even in Ashkelon Harbor, which was a harbor and fairly well protected, fish cages in a serious storm lost all of their stock. Is that something that you've looked at? I would imagine definitely that you have.
Yes, I didn't actually catch your name, Michael. Just for the record, could you give us your full name, please, Michael?
It's I'm known as Adrian Barnes. Michael is my official name.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. Yes, the submersible cage technology is really key to storm survivability. And the net pen system that we would be using has been deployed out off Ashdod Harbor in the Mediterranean. And it's about 8-10 miles out offshore there. I've been out and dived on that site. You look back on land, you can't see land when you're out on that site there. So it is exposed to the full brunt of Mediterranean storms. And whilst it is, the Mediterranean doesn't have as long a fetch as the Pacific, it does get very steep, sharp waves with a very short wave period. And so it does have very destructive wave energy there. They've been able to submerge the cages there and they're undamaged by those storms.
Not always.
The ones that you were speaking about inside a harbor would not have been this Gilly technology, submersible cage technology. That was...
Yeah, I'm aware of the submersible technology, and there has been storm damage. I mean, the fishermen are happy with it. They're not unhappy with it. But I can get, I'll give you a call and I'll give you a contact to talk to.
That would be great. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Okay.
Randy, I've been wondering when we'd hear from you. You've been unusually quiet. Randy Cates, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, Neil. Well, it's not my project or my meeting, but I have two questions. First is, as you know, I've put in a proposal for another site in the same area. And the governor and his administration has basically blocked it for over 6 years now, under DOT, stating that no aquaculture can occur within 5 miles of an airport. And my alternative site was my old site, which is what you're proposing. And I was denied from applying for that old site as well. So first question I have is, has DOT given you the blessing on this site? And if so, I'm very interested in that because they denied me, and I spent quite a few years, as you know, in a very lengthy EIS process. And then the next question is, have you reached out to the U.S. Navy in Pearl Harbor on the current site? Have they given their blessing as well? And any other questions or issues regarding the old site, I'm more than happy to answer. But that's my real interest is I'm a supporter of aquaculture. I was the first one in the nation to do it. I support all forms of this, but the bureaucracy as it stands is, I went forward for a site and I have been blocked ever since. And even as recently as a month ago, was told that. So I'm curious to know if somehow they gave you permission and not me permission for the site that you're proposing.
Thanks, Randy. This is an issue. I don't think you ever get the blessing from Department of Transport airports. When we had a scoping meeting with the state and federal agencies, the representative there from DOT airports had referred us to a Office of State Planning memorandum that had said that they were concerned about aquaculture within a 5-mile radius of airports because of its attractant, not just aquaculture, but anything that would be a bird attractant. And I have not yet started any other conversation with them. I was thinking about how to approach that, and it was going to be dependent on the exact location. And so when the community was saying, we'd like you to be this direction or that direction, initially my response to Alexander last week when he was saying, could you be further west? I was like, that's going to put me closer to Kalailoa Airport, and that's going to make it even harder for us to be able to get DOT approval. But I just, it was about 4 days ago, received a copy of a circular that's been put out by FAA from February of last year. And if you haven't got a copy of this, Randy, I'm happy to share it with you. That actually says that FAA goes through and they list all of the concerns for activities close to airports. And when they're talking about marine aquaculture, they say, so long as it's a submersible pen or it's got other guarantees that there won't be a bird attractant, that there should not be a problem. So with that, I'm now happy to, this is the idea of that alternative 2 that would be closer to Kalailoa. I think that's now viable, and that's something that I would like to take to DOT airports and further that discussion with them. To the question of, and so if do you have that FAA circular, Randy?
Yes. So the background on that is I'm the guy that flew to Washington, D.C. 4 times over a 3-year period to meet with FAA wildlife biologists to argue the point that aquaculture can occur within 5 miles of an airport, because all of aquaculture in the state of Hawaii occurs within 5 miles of an airport. And I mean all of it. Nelha is on airport property. Right. Yeah. and that came at a great expense to myself. And then I heard nothing for several years. And so I was given that. However, DOT has not recognized that yet. And actually the governor and DOT introduced the bill last year and this year statewide to ban all aquaculture within 5 miles of an airport. So it's a fight, to say the least. But my question has been, I have an approved CDUA and I've been denied based on that. And so it puts us all in a very strange position, I would say. Anybody that's supportive of aquaculture, whether it be in Hilo, on Molokai, every fish pond on Molokai is within that zone, pretty much. Kauai, every island is affected by this. Many people don't realize that. But the answer to your question is yes, I'm very aware of that, and I don't know how the state's position is going to be. So it's a big question mark for all of us right now.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that the best way is for us to move this discussion forward with DOT airports. I'm happy to keep you informed as to how that unfolds. And to your question about Navy at Pearl Harbor, no, I have not. I don't know what jurisdiction they have. We'll certainly be moving this forward through Army Corps of Engineers, but I know there's history with that project that was proposed by Don Kent off San Diego, where they spent 3 or 4 years looking at developing a plan for one site, and 3/4 of the way through the process, the Navy put their hand up and said, no, you can't go there for reason. We're not going to tell you why, but that's all top secret. We're not going to let you go there. So yes, we should probably reach out to them. Do you have a contact there, or actually maybe we should go through Army Corps of Engineers to get the right contact for Pearl Harbor?
Well, all my contacts are either retired or dead. They have a major concern, and I have a lot of experience with that. You have an active explosive range right next to you, and you know, I heard your presentation and I had a lot of comments, both supportive and also concerns. I probably not going to dive into them, but one thing that stuck out as in terms of shipping concerns, the interesting thing on that, just for knowledge for people that are online, the only time it really became an issue was when the Ihimi Maru came in and they were releasing fuel, and then the Port Royal went aground and released a bunch of sewage. But those were pretty far away, and I think all those concerns can be mitigated. You know, we operated our site for 14 years without a single complaint or not a single incident, but it was with a lot of hard work and effort on our part. So I guess my only point in all this is everything you pointed out, you know, it's really far different. However, when I started out, my operation was the first ever done. You always point out you're the first integrated, but my farm site was years ahead of what you guys did. It was the first offshore fish farm. And a lot of the concerns that I hear so far, they're easily mitigated. Not that they're not important, but there's mitigation to it.
Yeah.
Our big challenge is government and support in government. And I just don't see how they can give you permission and then still hold the line on saying you don't have permission. Because if they're able to do that, then we have a real bigger problem. You cannot say you can't have aquaculture within 5 miles and then arbitrarily say, well, you can't have aquaculture within 2 miles or whatever it is, especially if it's submerged cage culture. So I support you on that, but I also look at the agencies and going and say, you gotta have common sense approach and you gotta be fair.
Yeah, I think I support that, Randy, and I'm happy to keep you informed as this unfolds, how it proceeds. Mark Tagal, you had your hand up there at some stage.
Yeah.
You want to make a comment? Good to see you.
Yeah, this was a little lighter, just kind of some technical stuff. It seems like you guys have the hatchery aquaculture all hammered out there. would you be building a hatchery on Oahu, or would you be shipping fry from Kona to Oahu? And the second one, when you put Nenue offshore, being a bigger scale fish, are they susceptible to neobenedinia or any offshore critters? Just kind of curious about the biology about those guys.
Couple of great questions, Mark. Thank you very much. And for those that don't know, Mark, he previously run the hatchery here at Blue Ocean Mariculture. You're back in Seattle now still, are you, Mark?
I am, yeah. I'm working with some of the tribes over here, trying to do some other aquaculture.
Yeah, and so the plan that we have here, because Oceanic Institute has a marine fish hatchery facility there, Chad Callan is on the line here, and we've been speaking to Chad about reactivating that hatchery. It's sitting there unused, and they also have the capacity to be able to be collecting brood stock. And so the plan we have is working in collaboration with Oceanic Institute to be collecting brood stock locally there in Oahu, and that they would be then producing the fingerlings, and we'd be stocking them out offshore. The production that we had here was pretty much using standard marine fish hatchery culture production, so there wasn't any surprises there. We're very pleased with the survival was around 30%. For and for a first run, that was pretty pleasing. The Nenue offshore, there's a couple of bits of evidence for that. One is back about 5 years ago, we did some co-culture of some Kampachi and some Nenue in the same tank here in Kona, just as an experiment, and we ran them for about a month with a challenge trial. We got some netting that had neobenedinia eggs on it. For those that don't know, the neobenedinia is an ectoparasite. It's like a small little flea that attaches to the fish, and it makes the fish itchy, and it can be problematic if the fish try and scratch themselves and break their skin. And whilst there was neobenedinia was infecting the Nenue, out of the 8 or 10, the neobenedinia was infecting the Kampachi there in the rates that you normally see, but there was no neobenedinia at all on the Nenue. And we think the reason is the Nenue has what's called a ctenoid scale. It has on the back end of its scale, it has a whole bunch of spikes. And so as it swims, those spikes are constantly moving, and we think it just pokes the neobenedinia, the skin flukes, and so they get irritated and fall off. There's also, we have, as part of the first Velella project, the drifter cage there, there was one Nenue that had recruited from the wild, because Nenue, you'll often find keiki Nenue around fads and things out offshore. One of these had come inside the pen with the Kampachi and had grown up alongside the Kampachi over the 8 months that we had the drifter pen drifting around the back of the big island. And it was about a pound in size in about that 8 month period. Maybe it came in at about 100 grams, sorry, it was around 2 pounds. It was about 950 grams. And so it was very happy in that offshore location. And so that's the evidence that we have, Mark. But this is, we are going to try and think this through some more, run some more tests so that we'll be more confident when we do move fish out offshore. I realize we are getting close to the bottom of the hour here at 8:30, but I'm happy to keep taking questions if other people have. There's no reason why we need to end the call right here at this moment. Still happy to take more questions or comments. Anybody who has not yet commented but would like to, please raise your hand or speak up. Mike Plowman, thank you.
Aloha. Neil, I just want to say thank you so much for your outreach. The Department of the Navy could learn a lot from your playbook in this neighborhood, and I'll leave that at that. Thank you for that. Appreciate also your response to Dr. Gauss's recommendations of potentially moving the project further to the west. I'm in Beach resident as well. I'm generally in favor of what you're doing, the concept. And I would think that alternative 2 would make a little more sense because it's in shallower water than alternative 1 there. So you'd have a smaller scope and therefore footprint. But my question is have you ever had any problems in Kona with poaching? There are folks here who don't necessarily well, there seems to be a risk for that. Is all I'm saying. I'll leave it at that. I'm concerned how you deal with that.
Thank you, Mike. Yes. There was one instance where we had a poaching here in Kona. In the early years, there was a spear fisherman who will remain unnamed, but he was going out, and because the net pens in Kona were a great fad for ulua, he was going out at night and spearing ulua at night around the cages, which was fine. As I'd said earlier, we don't want to generally restrict fishing around the cages, but at some stage the temptation to fish under the zipper and fish inside the cages was, I guess, too much for him. And we first heard about this. Kona's a small community, and people were saying, you might want to look in his coolers. You can't. Legally, you're not allowed to look in anybody's cooler in this state. Okay, we had a conversation with him. He persisted, and then we had another conversation that involved some letters that just let him know that we were aware of what he was doing. He actually had an accident out on the cage site one night where he sunk his boat and nearly drowned. He and his son nearly drowned because they were tied up to the cages and the current shifted the cages. And at that point, we gave him back his boat, but on the condition that he not do it again. And that hasn't been an issue again. And I think also the thing that makes it something that is fairly easy to track is that there is a marked difference between a cultured, farmed Kampachi and a wild Kahala. And in the same way, I think what we're going to see with a farmed Nenue is going to be very different than what you see with a wild Nenue. The farmed Kampachi is like a little round football rather than a wild Kahala. The same species is a lot thinner and longer. And so it's fairly easy to identify fish that are farmed. And so if they are going to come onto the market in Honolulu, that we would find out about that fairly quickly. There's also, that was 15 years ago that we would first set up, more than 15 years ago that we first set up the farm off Kona, and technology has improved tremendously since then. So our capacity for video surveillance around the net pens has improved a lot as well. And so we would be able to have 24/7 surveillance around there. Great questions though, Mike. Thank you. And thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Stan Wright. Please go ahead, Stan.
I think this is, from what I've heard, a pretty good idea. I could see on a nice calm day, driving the boat up there. It shouldn't be too hard to locate this swinging net during the daytime, right? And just maybe do a little whipping or something around it for some small game. But my question is, as anti-business as Hawaii is, why would anybody in their right mind want to even attempt to do business here? It just, good luck. I hope you make it. Good luck. But from what I've heard, oh my God.
Thank you, Stan. Yes, yeah, this would not be hard to find. There will, at the front of the array, there will be a feed barge there, as we'd shown on that diagram there. So there will be a surface barge at the top. It'll be easier to see, and there will be buoys and lighting that will mark where the net pens are. So in the daytime and at nighttime, it should be fairly easy to be able to see this. As to why we would do this here, well, as I said, this is where I live now. I was originally Australian, but I've worked in the Pacific Islands my whole life, my whole professional life. And I think we feel a real obligation as marine biologists, watching what's happening in the ocean, seeing all of these global issues that need to be addressed. We really feel an obligation that we have to do this. This is why, you know, it's fairly easy to go and get a permit in Mexico. And we were able to get that permit in Mexico and start that farm up. But that's not where I want to. My Spanish is lousy. My wife has tenure at the local community college. I don't want to live in Mexico. And I feel a real obligation to be doing this here and to be demonstrating that we can do offshore aquaculture in an environmentally responsible way, and to be publicizing that. I think that's, you know, the ASC certification, the shameless chest thumping that we did in terms of publicizing Kona Campachi and the project in Mexico. That's all really important to help change the dynamic and the public perceptions around aquaculture, because we need to be able to have more of it. There's more recognition now, and I think we've had conversations about this project with Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy. I'd like to get some contacts for the Sierra Club. Please, if anybody has those, please provide those for me. Generally, the data-driven environmental community is supportive of offshore aquaculture because they've seen it in examples like here in Kona, or there's a project in Panama. But thank you, Stan, for your comments. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Randy has his hand up, but let's just give somebody else a moment, Randy, if you would. If anybody else has any comments that they'd like to offer or questions.
Jeff Harris.
Jeff Harris, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, sir. I might have got into the your presentation a little later, but I thought I saw cage culture along with the Limu. You were saying it was downstream, so farming the Limu on the offside. The purpose of that, I would be assuming, is for nutrient control. If you're growing the Limu, is that also for, your hopes are for feed production to make feed for the fish, or is that for consumer consumption?
Both, Jeff. Yes, and ideally it would be both, but we don't know yet. You know, the Limu culture, developing technology for offshore Limu culture is still very early. But ideally, we'd like to be able to both reduce the cost of the feed to the Nenue and also be able to provide Limu into the local market in Oahu and then also to the other islands.
So then you would come in and harvest it and then take it land-based and then pelletize it, or do what you want if you're using it as feed, right?
Yes, and that's still to be determine exactly how we do it, whether we're feeding it as a wet diet or whether we are, you know, Limu is 90% water. And so if a fish has got a certain amount of space in its stomach for digestion, it's going to make a lot more sense if you can dry that Limu and make it more nutrient dense, then you'll be able to get it to digest and absorb more of those nutrients, and hopefully then you'll get better growth. But that's going to be an added cost. There's this probably fairly naive vision that we have that you can take the feed barge down to the Limu lines and load up with Limu and then bring it up next to the Nenue pens and just toss it into the Nenue pens and everybody would be happy. But that's there's still a lot of work that has to go to figure out what's the best way to do that. But your initial question, yes, the reason to have the Limu down current is that would then promote the growth of the Limu, to be getting the nitrogen and the phosphorus that it needs. And it would, in some way, also reduce the nitrogen and the phosphorus in the effluent waters. But we don't know. I don't want to make any claims about that yet because we don't know how significant that will be.
So I assume as this is submersing and rising up, it's however it's attached. So is there from the community or whatnot, any concerns of sloughing or whatnot, and then a release of any of that algae product, or that would, I'm not sure how in your diagram or drawing it identify. I just wonder how that system is set up. It might be a good for clarification to when in a community presentation.
Yes, and that's still, you know, we ourselves don't know. We're developing that as we speak. But if there is any, we'll only use native Limu. So if there is any sloughing that ends up on the coast, we would hope that that's considered to be an asset for those that might want to be picking the Limu. And it's certainly, it's going to be a loss to us. We wouldn't want to be seeing Limu drifting downstream, because that's potential revenue or potential feed that's drifting off.
So I like that process in the polycultures of it all. And I think that's important to identify in your presentation to the community when you're dealing with environmental groups. I work with a group, Huyo Kolau Pok, on the windward side, and does nearshore and upland restoration projects. So I'm just following along in that sense. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it. Any other comments from?
Aloha, I'd like to say something.
Yes, please, Pahonu Coleman, please go ahead.
So I'm not from the Ewa Beach community, but I haven't heard so much, at least from a lot of the Ewa Beach community yet, and their opinions about this project. But I'd just like to ask is there any more community meetings that you'll be holding?
Good question, Pahonu. I think I would look to the community for guidance. That's part of what this outreach is, and why at the start and the end of my presentation, I put my email address and my phone number there. Were you able to mark those down, Pahonu? Because please, what I'm looking for here is for people to connect me to other groups or other individuals.
Yes.
Yeah.
I only bring that up because I am concerned that you're just going to take this one meeting and put it as community input when clearly not all groups are represented well. And I just, for my fellow Ewa Beach community, I just like to say that just please don't have this one meeting and take this and put it in your report that, you know, you did community outreach. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Pahonu. So yeah, please do connect me with any folk from Ewa Beach. And I think that was the goal of the presentation to the neighborhood board, was to find out who else we should be speaking to in the community. And I'm happy to do these regularly if there's interest from the community and from other stakeholders. But mahalo for your comments, Pahonu. Any others who have not yet had a chance to speak? Or we hand the microphone back to Randy.
Could I say something, Neil? This is Jim.
Jim, I don't.
Wyban.
Jim Wyban. Yes, please go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm calling in from Hilo, and I'm sorry to see you move your project to Oahu, because we love your work in Kona, and excellent presentation. I think that, you know, I've got some biology interests that we'll have to talk about at another time, but since this is a community-based meeting, if you could say a few words about the economic development implications of this project. That is, how many jobs do you think you would create, which is, you know, important to Leeward Oahu? And I'm also going along that line on the economics of it. Do you see, or do you have enough information yet that switching from top carnivore Kampachi to an herbivorous Nenue, what are the economic implications of that in terms of costs, you know, dollars per kilo production or something? Do you have those numbers? Do you have an idea about that yet?
Let me answer your last question first. Thank you very much, Jim. Always a pleasure to hear from somebody as experienced as yourself in this. We haven't yet identified the diet that we would use in commercial production. Yet we've tested a number of diets that have been experimental, but it's very hard to get the feed companies to go and produce one-off diets for your one project. And so what we're going to be doing with these keiki that we have from the hatchery now is to be testing those with more commercially available diets for catfish and tilapia. The advantage there is that they're very low on the trophic level, that it's herbivorous fish diets. And so ecologically that's advantageous. And also they're very inexpensive. They're not chicken feed. Some of them are actually cheaper than chicken feed. And that's then balanced with, okay, it's Nenue, and some of us love ourselves Nenue, but it doesn't get the same price in the market as Kampachi. We don't know yet, depending on the diet will affect the product quality. The product quality is going to impact the price that we can get for the fish, but a better diet is going to be more expensive. And so it's a circular discussion there to figure out exactly what we will be feeding the fish and what price we would be able to expect in the market. But we hope to be able to nail that down here over the with this batch of fingerlings that we'll be doing these trials with. In terms of economic development, part of the reason, as I'd said, to be locating in Oahu is that there's more of a labor pool available there, and there's more aquaculture trainees. One of the initial, with the Kona Kampachi operation here in Kona, one of the disappointments I had was just that there wasn't a lot of available trained labor for either the hatchery or for the offshore operation when we first started up 15 years ago. I think that's changed a lot. Ocean Era, at the moment, we have 8 employees, and 5 of those came through the Hilo system, and or Hilo or UH. And I think that I know that I've been in contact with some of the professors from the Leeward Community College, that they have an aquaculture program operating there. And Chad at Oceanic Institute, they are also affiliated with Hawaii Pacific University. And so there's been a lot more training for aquaculture in the last 15 years. And I don't, at the moment, know yet exactly how many employees we're going to have, but I would hope that we would be able to source all of that labor locally, rather than as we had to do with the initial startup of the Kona operation, where we brought a lot of those employees in. But I think if you look at the model of the blue ocean mariculture now, in terms of number of employees, I think they have about 7 in their hatchery and 15 or so in their offshore operations. But then there's also, when you think about economic development, there's also the multipliers. And so generally, when you look at the direct employment in an aquaculture operation, there's a factor of a 2 or a 3 multiplier. So it might be 25 employees that you have directly employed, but then through the other support industries and the seafood distribution, the growth in economic activity, there might be a factor of 2 or 3 more than that. That's just broad brush guessing, essentially, Jim. Please don't quote me on those numbers. But thank you for your comments, Jim. Appreciate it. Any other folk who have not spoken, would like to say a word or two? Randy, you have your hand up again. Did you have other comments, please?
Yeah, Neil, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I have a lot of comments just because I have a quite a bit of knowledge on this industry and that particular site, but I've gotten a lot older since we've known each other, so I've forgotten half the comments. The first one was regarding theft, and I will share that I operated that site for many, many years, and it wasn't really an issue for several reasons. One is the very people that oppose us on my original site became my greatest asset, which was the fishermen. And they were my eyes and security guards out there. But it's very difficult to actually harvest fish out of these cages in submerged cage culture, for those that don't know. And so theft is a very, in terms of risk assessment, is very low on the list. Not that it doesn't happen. It happens more within your own employees than it would from outside. As long as you can control that, but that's a company risk. Economic development. I will share with everybody that, when I did it, I was harvesting about 15,000 pounds per week production, and all of that product stayed in Hawaii. So the goal of any company is not to have high expenses, high labor costs, high feed costs, but the goal is to produce and I actually always opposed Neil on this in the early days. Was I always said, I'm trying to produce a piece of chicken. He was trying to produce a piece of prime rib. And we would share that in a lot of our talks. And it was very true that my goal was to produce a fish that was economical to the local consumer. And we did achieve that because all of our products stayed in Hawaii. That is really the matrix that shows you that what your goal is. I wasn't trying to produce a product that was exported. We differed on that. Their product was solely exported for reasons that Neil highlighted, and it's a complicated issue about where your market is and how your growth and all that. But if you grow the fish on Oahu, that fish can be exported throughout the Hawaiian Islands cheaper than if you grow that fish in Kona or any other islands. It's just not a matter of economics. So I will say that the economics of it and the potential of that is pretty high. Who did we compete against? Well, who we really were competing against was the Opakapaka market. What happened was, when they shut down the Northwest Hawaiian Islands fishery from Opakapaka and bottom fish, we filled that void. And the only other competition really came from the Persian Gulf, which was shipping bottom fish from the Persian Gulf to Hawaii. It wasn't in the main Hawaiian Islands. So the economics of it are complicated. The last comment I have on is in terms of the Limu and the potential use of that as a feed. I'm gonna be very honest here that that is a feel-good talking point right now. I don't really think it's feasible or economical. Nothing against the company for trying that, but I just don't see that as being really, really feasible. When you're producing a fish farm, it's all about economics, and it's all about sustainability and doing it in an environmentally safe manner. And sometimes when you try and do it in that manner, it may not meet all those standards. So not that it won't work, but the economics of it, I think, are going to be very, very challenging. So finally, in regards to the economics and COVID, that's a big question mark as Neil and I got to face and it relates to labor. One other comment I had regarding labor. I disagree with Neil on this statement about labor. I see more value in labor on the outer islands than I do on Oahu. Neil doesn't live on Oahu, doesn't hire on Oahu, and I do. And there's a very big shift in our ability to hire labor that want to work on the waterfront. I have a business that does that, has been for 30 plus years. And it's very challenging finding a young person that actually wants to go out and work on boats and work on the waterfront and work in aquaculture. And that's a big, huge concern. They can go and work on the rail project and make 3 times the money. They can go get a construction job. They can go do all these other things. And labor is our biggest challenge. Having said that, the last point is the highest labor rates are in Norway. And yet they have one of the best aquaculture industries in the world. So we need to put that in perspective. Aquaculture can pay high labor rates, and I did on my past farm. I don't want my comments to be used against aquaculture, and I would say that if aquaculture can succeed in Hawaii, they're high-paying jobs, and they can be, and it's just a matter of support and government support and getting us to that point. We're not talking about, $20 an hour wage for workers. We're talking about much higher skilled labor to go out and do the work. It's about technology and using the right equipment and very, very skilled labor. My past farm, every employee was making probably 2 to 3 times of what they could at any other field that they came from. And they were all from Hawaii, and they were all local guys. I always tell a story about taking 3 divers and myself to Ireland, 3 Hawaiians and myself, to go show fish farmers in Hawaii how to harvest salmon in a submerged cage. And labor is an issue, but it is, if you do it right, it'll be high paying wages, not low paying wages. It's not truck driver wages. It's much higher than that. So with that, I'll end, and we'll see what the future holds for the industry in Hawaii.
Please. This is the guy his name is John Randolph. John Randolph.
Who's talking?
Never mind.
Let me interrupt real quick. That can only be one guy, because he knows my name, and we're both named after the same guy that signed the Declaration of Independence. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay, sorry about that, Neil, but go ahead.
Okay, no, whoever it was on the iPhone, did you have a comment or a question?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with any? Thank you, Randy, for that. I think, yes, the economics and the employment opportunities are important, and it's I do appreciate your mana'o. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? And seeing none, I'd wish you all a good night, and please do, again, if you want me to reach out to you, either send me an email, send me a text, or put your email address here in the comments section now. I'll leave this comment section open for another couple of minutes, and I'll take all those email addresses from there. But I want to thank you all very much for your interest and your support, and for whatever community contacts that you can provide to us. Mahalo kako.
Mahalo, Neil.
Thanks, Tom. Good to see you.